ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to the desert. In yesterday's video, guys, we talked about women, and I asked the question, have women always been the same? Have they always been so subjective to emotion, to the point where you cannot have a conversation with them? Have they always been dismissive of their husband's opinions? Have they always been hard to understand, all those things that make women hard to get along with nowadays? And I asked this question. Most of you guys said no, Hidan. In fact, in the past, it was easier. In the past, women were better. But I figured, you know what, guys? Let's actually answer that question. What better way to do than to take a look at what old philosophers thought about women and old scriptures wrote about them. So with that, we're going to get started with no other less than the father of Western philosophy, Socrates, and one of his apprentices, Aristotle. Alright, so we're gonna get started with those two guys. We're gonna take a look at Western philosophers, mostly because those are the ones I know, and because in the end we are living and dating in the West. Alright, now because I'm a 4,000-year-old mummy, I've actually met with some of these guys. Alright, not enough is said about Socrates being the party animal that he was. Instead, he's well known for his philosophy, so we're gonna take a look at that. So we'll get started with Aristotle. He said, "Wherefore women are more compassionate and more readily made to weep, more jealous and querulous, fonder of railing, and more contentious. The female also is more subject to depression of spirits and despair than the male. She is also more shameless and false, more readily deceived, and more mindful of injury, more watchful, more idle, and on the whole less excitable than the male. On the contrary, the male is more ready to help, and, as it has been said, braver than the female. If the sepia is struck with a trident, the male comes to help the female, but the female makes her escape if the male is struck." Now, this is something we covered on yesterday's video, when I said that women will try to, not be held accountable. She'll try to put the blame on you. She'll try to put the pain on you, alright? She is the one that tries to escape her way out of all those things. So do you agree with that, guys? But now let's take a listen at what Socrates had to say. He said, "Trust not a woman when she weeps, for it is her nature to weep when she wants her will." He also stated, "When a woman is allowed to become a man's equal, she becomes his superior." Facts. Now let's take a listen to another thing that Aristotle said. He said, "So it is naturally with the male and the female. The one is superior, the other inferior. The one governs, the other is governed, and the same rule must necessarily hold good with respect to all mankind." Aristotle, I'm going to ask you to please not be a misogynist on my channel. We don't mess with misogyny here. Alright, guys, you'll find out that these guys from more than 2,000 years ago do not necessarily share opinions with some blue-haired individuals that have a major in gender studies in the city of Los Angeles, alright? So, a bit bigoted, these guys. It's also fair to point out, guys, not all philosophers had this sort of mindset. Plato, for example, Socrates' student, he held the belief that women are on the same intellectual level as men, and that they can become equally as good warriors or scholars or whatever not if taught correctly. So he was really ahead of his time in that aspect. But guys, what are your thoughts? Guys, we're gonna just leave them in the past, alright? The Greek philosophers, and we're gonna move on to a philosopher that is considered the pessimistic one. We're gonna take a look at Nietzsche, and he said, "A woman does not want the truth. What is truth to women? From the beginning, nothing has been more alien, repugnant, and hostile to women than the truth. Her great art is the lie. Her highest concern is mere appearance and beauty." He also stated, "Woman learns how to hate in proportion as she forgets how to charm." This rings so true, gentlemen, with a lot of women that are in their 30s and they couldn't be more bitter. If they wanted to, they couldn't, alright? They're just so bitter from so many years of going against their own nature, of being nurturing and supporting, and being pretty bad to be around. Now, Nietzsche also said, "A woman may very well form a friendship with a man, but for this to endure, it must be accompanied by a little physical antipathy. So Nietzsche basically says that men and women can't be friends, which do you agree with, guys? I absolutely agree. I think that there are small instances where this is not the case, maybe friends with male relatives or opposite gender relatives, or friendships that started in the really early years where you've seen this other person for the last 30 years as nothing more than a friend. I believe that friendships can happen there, but outside of that, if a man and a woman are not friends, are only friends, well, that just means for me that they really just don't find each other attractive, all right? Because if they do, there will be tension there, some romantic and S3 one. But now he also said, woman was God's second mistake, implying that man was the first one. Really interesting take. He also said, if a woman possesses manly virtues, one should run from her, and if she does not possess them, she runs away from herself. Interesting. So Nietzsche basically says, in modern day language, or right translation, if a woman is bossy and feels entitled and she's confrontative, run for the hills, all right? Nietzsche basically says, I wouldn't touch a woman like these with a 10-foot pole. On the second part, I interpret as him saying, when women lack the masculine traits, they run from themselves, running to sort of seek shelter in men. You know, they want the rationality and providing, and for the men to be the emotional back pillar. But now let's move on, guys. He also says the perfect woman is a higher type of human than the perfect man, and also something much more rare. Very interesting. Do you agree with that, guys? But now we're gonna take a look at the actual pessimistic one, right? A lot is said about Nietzsche, guys. Not enough is said about Schopenhauer. Who is the real pessimistic one, guys? This guy here on screen. Now, something you may not know about him. This man never had children. He never had a wife. He never cared to be with women. But interestingly enough, he received some female unwanted presence in his home, all right? Some intruder. I don't know exactly what happened, but this woman basically came to his place unwanted. And so he pushed her out of his own house, and in doing so, she fell. And she sued him for damages, and this guy ended up paying alimony for the rest of his life, all right? He paid alimony to this woman he didn't even know, who intruded his home until his last day on earth. Isn't that interesting? And he says, women have great talent, but no genius, for they always remain subjective. But guys, you know what? Instead of taking a look at quotes, we're just going to take a look at a passage from his book. So I read from Arthur Schopenhauer's book on women. One need only look at a woman's shape to discover that she is not intended for either too much mental or too much physical work. Pays the depth of life not by what she does, but by what she suffers, by the pains of childbearing, care for the child, and by subjection to man, to whom she should be a patient and cheerful companion. So I believe this to be true, guys, that men, you see that in dating in society, we don't expect out of women to achieve things necessarily. We rather value them based on how much they suffer. And it is true that they suffer from obeying men a lot of the times, right? And if you see two women to have a coffee, they can whine about men for 3 hours because they find us annoying. And I'm absolutely fine with that. Men find women annoying, women find men annoying. It's absolutely normal. But I want you to think about this, guys. A patient and cheerful companion. Just these 3 words, all right? Be patient. We men, we know that we may be annoying sometimes, or we may be hard to deal with on your part. We understand that. Just be patient, all right? Nobody's asking these women, guys, to be objective like a robot, to, have no emotions at all. No, you don't get to be sad. You don't get to do this. You have to control yourself like you're a monk. No, nobody's expecting that. Just be patient. That's all we're asking. Don't create problems out of thin air. Don't take it too far. Don't become so subjective to the point where we cannot even have a conversation, right? So patient and cheerful companion, someone who's pleasant to be around. These are, guys, the thing that over 90% of men will settle for, all right? A patient and cheerful companion. Yet nowadays it's so hard to even find that. The greatest sorrows and joys or great exhibition of strength are not assigned to her. Her life should flow more quietly, more gently, and less obtrusively than men's, without her being essentially happier or unhappier. This is also why, guys, women live longer than men. It's because they have a life that flows more quietly and gently. Men work their bodies to the very death. Women are directly adapted to act as the nurses and educators of our early childhood for the simple reason that they themselves are childish, foolish, and short-sighted. In a word, are big children all their lives, something intermediate between the child and the man, who is a man in the strict sense of the word. Consider how a young girl will toy day after day with a child, dance with it and sing to it, and then consider what a man with the very best intentions in the world could do in her place. With girls, nature has had in view what is called in a dramatic sense a striking effect. She endows them for a few years with a richness of beauty and a fullness of charm at the expense of the rest of their lives, so that they may during these years ensnare the fantasy of a man to such a degree as to make him rush into taking the honorable care of them in some kind of form for a lifetime, a step which will not seem sufficiently justified if he only considered the matter. Now, I remember, guys, I was talking with someone, I can't remember who it was, but it was an elder gentleman, and he told me, Hidan, get married young, because if you wait around, you're going to consider. Alright, he told me, Hidan, marry young when women are attractive, because when they lose their attractiveness, you're really going to have no incentive. But do you agree with Schopenhauer here, guys? Accordingly, nature has furnished woman, as she has the rest of her creatures, with the weapons and implements necessary for the protection of her existence and for just the length of time that they will be of service to her, so that nature has proceeded with her usual economy. Just as the female ant, after coition, loses her wings, which then become superfluous, nay, dangerous for breeding purposes, so for the most part does a woman lose her beauty after giving birth to 1 or 2 children, and probably for the same reasons. Now, I think, guys, that women, yes, they lose their big part of their physical appeal, just like men do, but a woman that has personality, a woman that has more things to offer than just her beauty, remains beautiful in the eyes of her husband or boyfriend for the rest of his life. But the women who stay single and they only capitalize on their attractiveness, they really lose it at some point and they are left with nothing. I continue reading. Then again, we find that young girls in their hearts regard their domestic or other affairs as secondary things, if not as mere jest. Love, conquests, and all that these include, such as dressing, dancing, and so on, they give their serious attention. The nobler and more perfect a thing is, the later and slower is it in reaching maturity. Man reaches the maturity of his reasoning and mental faculties scarcely before he's 28. Woman when she is 18. But here is a reason, but hers is reason of very narrow limitations. This is why women remain children all their lives, for they always see only what is near at hand. Cling to the present, take the appearance of a thing for a reality, and prefer trifling matters to the most important. It is by virtue of man's reasoning powers that he does not live in the present only, like the brute, but observes and ponders over the past and the future, and from this spring discretion, care, and that anxiety which we so frequently notice in people. The advantages, as well as the disadvantages that this entails, make woman, in consequence of her weaker reasoning powers, less of a partaker in them. Moreover, she is intellectually short-sighted, for although her intuitive understanding quickly perceives what is near to her, on the other hand, her circle of vision is limited and does not embrace anything that is remote. Hence, everything that is absent or past or in the future affects women in a less degree than men. That is why they have greater inclination for extravagance, which sometimes borders on madness. Women in their hearts think that men are intended to earn money so that they may spend it, if possible during their husband's lifetime, but at any rate after his death. As soon as he has given them his earnings on which to keep house, they are strengthened in this belief. Although all this entails many disadvantages, yet it has this advantage, that a woman lives more in the present than a man, and that she enjoys it more keenly if it is at all bearable. This is the origin of that cheerfulness which is peculiar to woman and makes her fit to divert man, and in case of need, to console him when he is weighed down by cares. To consult women in matters of difficulty, as the Germans used to do in all times, is by no means a matter to be overlooked, for their way of grasping a thing is quite different from ours, chiefly because they like the shortest way to the point and usually keep their attention fixed upon what lies nearest, while we, as a rule, see beyond it, for the simple reason that it lies under our nose. It then becomes necessary for us to be brought back to the thing in order to obtain a near and simple view. I believe this to be true. I believe that women are more, they're closer to the essentials. They're closer to the basic things that comprise life, if that makes any sense. They're more pure in that aspect. I don't know if you agree, guys. I continue reading. This is why women are more sober in their judgment than we, and why they see nothing more in things than is really there, while we, if our passions are roused, slightly exaggerate or add to our imagination. It is because women's reasoning powers are weaker that they show more sympathy for the unfortunate than men, and consequently take a kindlier interest in them. So again, I agree with this. This is why also you have a lot of men that some people call quote-unquote homophobes or racists or any word ending in "ob" or "ist." Not because I necessarily believe that to be true, but because men have this way of thinking of how things should be, right? They try to seek justice and rightful judgment. They're more judgmental. They're more, critical about things. Women, on the other hand, the way they think is how things will be in a perfect world, or how everyone will feel the bestest about them, So this is why a lot of men are more judgmental and are called a bunch of words nowadays. I continue reading. On the other hand, women are inferior to men in matters of justice, honesty, and consciousness. Again, because their reasoning faculty is weak, things clearly visible and real and belonging to the present exercise a power over them which is rarely counteracted by abstract thoughts, fixed maxims, or firm resolutions, in general by regard for the past and future, or by consideration for what is absent and remote. Accordingly, they have the first and principal qualities of virtue, but they lack the secondary qualities which are often a necessary instrument in developing it. Women may be compared in this aspect to an organism that has a liver but no gallbladder, so that it will be found that the fundamental fault in the character of women is that they have no sense of justice. This arises from their deficiency in the power of reasoning already referred to and reflection, but is also partly due to the fact that nature has not destined them, as the weaker sex, to be dependent on strength but on cunning. This is why they are instinctively crafty and have an ineradicable tendency to lie. For as lions are furnished with claws and teeth, elephants with tusks, boars with fangs, bulls with horns, and the cuttlefish with its dark inky fluid, so nature has provided woman for her protection and defense with the faculty of dissimulation, and all the power which nature has given to men in the form of bodily strength and reason has been conferred on woman in this form. Hence, dissimulation is innate in woman and almost as characteristic of the very stupid as of the clever. Accordingly, it is as natural for women to dissemble at every opportunity as it is for those animals to turn to their weapons when they are attacked, and they feel in doing so that in a certain measure they are only making use of their rights. Very interesting point, gentlemen. I want to share a story with you. This was, shared to me, by a friend. He's an elder gentleman. He's in his 60s or 70s now, and he told me about his first divorce. All right, the reason why he got divorced is because this guy, when he was younger, was a businessman. He was working the long hours, long days. He was not at home for much time, and well, his wife divorced him. Now, to be clear, he didn't cheat on her, he didn't abuse her, didn't beat her. There was nothing wrong outside of the fact that he just didn't spend a lot of time at home and he prioritized work, all right? And he was working very long hours. So she divorced him, guys, and after that, right, after she divorced him, she just wanted to see him dead, all right? She did everything in her power to tear this man down. She tried to get all his friends against him, started spreading misinformation about him. She just wanted to destroy him mentally, destroy him psychologically. She started suing him for a lot of money, even though her standard of living was already incredibly rich, because this guy was rich out of his mind, and she already had that lifestyle. She already could have more money than she could count. She could have not received any more money and lived till her very death, all right? But she wanted to just sue him, to just continue taking money from him. Again, guys, she just wanted to do everything in her power to destroy this man. And this went on for many years. And finally, the guy had a heart attack. All right, because of the stress and all that, he had a heart attack. And it was in the hospital where this woman went to see him. And she apologized. She said, what I did was wrong. What I did was evil. Sorry for that. I will not do it anymore. Right? The guy needed a heart attack for her to come to reason and say, you know what? Maybe this thing I'm doing is not the best moral behavior. And then she stopped. And this guy, by the way, shared this story absolutely objectively with me. He is way more defensive about her position than I am, guys. Because look, men... I don't believe that women are more inherently evil than men, or more morally, bad in their ways and their approach. But it's just a more subtle and cunning way of being evil, right? Like men, they may grape, they may physically abuse, and while these things are absolutely horrible and horrifying, they are things that are easy to spot and are things that are easy to be judged by the whole society. The way in women are evil is not so easy to spot. All these schemes and games and manipulations, they're not really something that is easy to point out. And a lot of people will dismiss them, all right? Straight up dismiss them, because they are so close to what being a normal woman is. The line is very thin between a woman who is more emotional and a woman who is straight up insane. All right, so you'll see this with, for example, if a man says, guys, I won't be able to make it tonight, my wife doesn't want me to go out with you, they'll probably all laugh and talk about how women are like this, no problem at all. If a woman, on the other hand, says, oh, girls, I can't go out tonight, my husband won't allow me, now we're talking about controlling, we're talking about how big of a manipulator he is, right? You see the double standard there, guys, that women being so emotional is so attributed to them that it no longer impresses anybody, right? But going back to my story, again, just the straight up psychotic behavior of this woman towards her men, guys, is something that is really frightening to me as a mere concept. How women can be evil to such a point that they are sadistic about it. Like they take pleasure in seeing someone else suffering. This is something I have never seen with men, never. For all the bad things that men do, I have never seen them take joy in watching another people suffer. And I believe this goes back to what Schopenhauer said, that these women, they feel justified in doing so because they feel that this is their right. All right, and in small doses, you see this where you have a couple arguing, and because the woman felt bad, she feels in her right to make her husband feel bad, And in bigger proportions, it comes in aspects like the story I shared with you, right? Where a woman is literally trying to ruin all your life. But we're going to continue reading now, guys. I just find it interesting how, yes, they think that it's their right to inflict pain upon others. You may have made a woman feel bad directly or indirectly, all right? You may not even be aware that she feels bad, but she already feels in her right to reflect that upon you and ease her pain by causing you pain. We continue now. Leave me your thoughts about this story, guys. Therefore, a woman who is perfectly truthful and does not dissemble is perhaps an impossibility. Interesting take. This is why they see through dissimulation in others so easily. Therefore, it is not advisable to attempt it with them. From the fundamental defect that has been stated and all that it involves, bring falseness, faithlessness, treachery, ungratefulness, and so on. But guys, we're gonna cut Schopenhauer short here. You can read more about this book if you are interested to do so. But now we're gonna move on to some old scriptures, all right? And what better old scriptures than to take a look at the Bible, gentlemen? Now, I just want to emphasize and make absolutely clear that this channel will never be religious, all right? Those of you who have watched the channel know that I am religious personally and I believe in God, but this is not the message of the channel, all right? I just want you to take these texts for what they are regardless of whether you're religious or non-religious, just take them for what they are. They're old scriptures that talk about women in a lot of instances, so I thought that they will be quite appropriate. So we're going to start with this one. It says, all the women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. Alright, I wanted to compare this, this verse that, you know, portrays women in this position of power, where they influence a whole generation. They are a blessing to their husbands. They are controlled and pure and all that. I wanted to compare that to your average woman above 30 who is single and miserable, making TikToks to indoctrinate other women into following their own path to misery and devastation. All right, just absolute contrast there. Now let's continue with another verse. From Proverbs we read, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And also she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Moving on, their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. So interesting verses, guys, portraying the women as, you know, being being able to have a really high moral understanding of things. All right, women are not portrayed in a way where they're just stupid. You know, we're not going to expect anything out of them. This is why, guys, I hold women accountable. They're not stupid at all. They have moral understandings and all that. And even though they may be more subjective, emotional, that doesn't give them a free pass to be straight up toxic. You know. Moving on, also from Proverbs, this is one of my favorite verses. It is better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. Share this many times on the channel, guys. It's better for you to lose a leg, lose a limb, lose your job, get backstabbed by a friend than it is to wife up a bad wife. All right, because you can recover from all these other things more easily, but to commit, guys, to a woman that is quarrelsome is literally the worst thing that can happen to you. And King Solomon, who wrote Proverbs, also states this, that it is better to live in one corner of a housetop than in a big and you know, rich house, but with a quarrelsome wife. It's better, in other words, to live under a bridge than with a bad woman. I think we can all agree. Moving on, also from Proverbs, strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. Heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. Very interesting, guys. So you can see that women, the same guy says that it will be better to live under a bridge than with a bad woman. But about good women, he says, they are more precious than jewels, far more precious than jewels. You know, who can find an excellent wife? She will be a constant blessing. So you see how women have the power to be the biggest blessing in your life, but also the biggest liability, right? Depending on the type of woman. Moving on, she is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast are called blessed. Again, reinforcing the point there. Now, reading from Corinthians, but I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ, the head of a wife is her husband, and the head of Christ is God. In Proverbs, an excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who brings shame is like rottenness in his bones. Isn't that interesting, guys? A woman who is good, she is, like men wear her like a badge of honor. But a woman who is bad, she brings shame, like rottenness in his bones. All right, it's like it comes from inside. It rots from the inside, guys. Seen men absolutely tear down by life because they share it with a woman that is bad, and everything they do, right, it affects their whole lives. They become so incredibly miserable in every aspect because of it. But now, reading from Colossians, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. So in the Bible, stated many times, women should submit to men. Now, a lot of men will read this and say, we have to be slaves. But this is why I put the verse of Corinthians here, because, again, it states, I want you to understand that the head of every man, Christ, and the head of a wife is her husband. So the way that women, according to the Bible, should submit to their husbands is not by becoming slaves, because men that submit to God, they're not slaves, right? I mean, people who are religious, it doesn't make you a slave to be religious. It makes you free, because you choose to devote your life to Christ. For example, in the same way that a wife may choose to devote her life to her husband, it doesn't make you a slave. On the contrary, you choose this. You understand how things work, and you take this approach, right? Moving on, likewise also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls, or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. Right? This is not to say that instead of wearing a nice and beautiful dress, you should wear a sack of potatoes on your body, right? It's not to say that you cannot adorn yourself in any way, shape, or form. No, it's just to say that if you emphasize just your physical appearance, that probably means that you have nothing else to show for, right? Or you have your priorities wrong. Excuse me. Another verse that reinforces this: do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. A lot of men, guys, fall for this, they make the mistake to be with a woman just because of her looks. And again, looks fade, and you're left with nothing. You're left with her personality, which in most of the cases, women who focus more on their looks than in their personality, take a guess at what kind of personality they have, boys. And there was another verse. This one is my favorite. It says, like a gold ring on a pig's snot is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. All right? Beauty, it goes a long way with both men and women, but is the equivalent of a gold ring on a pig's snot. All right? Yes, it's golden, but it's on a pig's snot. So, physical attractiveness, guys, not really emphasized as something important in the Bible. So now let's move on to another verse. This is from Genesis. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. This is God talking. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. And Galatians says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Alright, I wanted to have these verses together because, again, the Bible saying that a wife's desire shall be beneath her husband's and that he shall rule over her. It sounds like, oh wow, well, this is the patriarchy. But in Galatians, in Christ's eyes, we are all the same. That men are not more important than women in any way, shape, or form. We are equal in God's eyes, all right? But nonetheless, he says that wives should submit to their husbands. And the reason why this is in Genesis is because this is right after Eve committed a sin, and she was the first to transgress God's law. Thus, I believe, guys, this is my personal belief, but I believe this is why God told men to rule over women. I think that in heaven, before sin, they had still different roles, don't get me wrong, but I think that the husband didn't rule over the wife, right? That Adam didn't rule over Eve. I think this is a outcome of the way and the matter in which Eve sinned. But do you agree with that, gentlemen? Now let's move on to a similar verse. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman. and all things are from God. Again, just because Adam was created first, in God's eyes, there is no first or second. There is not more important or less important. In God's eyes, a woman and a man are equally as valuable, equally as important, and equally closer to Him, right? So now moving on, guys, we have a few more verses. Let's take a listen. In Ephesians, we read, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her." And actually, I should have read it from the bottom. Chronologically, Ephesians says, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, His body, and is in Himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands." And this is when it reads, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her." So, gentlemen, if you have not read the Bible, in the Bible, a lot of times there is a metaphor that God is the husband and the church is the bride, right? So there's this analogy between God being the husband and the church the wife. And in the same way, we read here, and this is something that I also stated moments ago, that women are to, obey men or submit to them in the same way that Christians submit to Christ. It's not slavery, it's the total opposite. It's the faith that, Christ is our leader. This is what religious people believe, that you cannot really fight sin on your own. You cannot really win the war on your own. You need Christ to lead you. And so in the same way, women just believe that a man to lead is better, that he knows better, that he has good intentions in his heart for them, all right? And for men, look at what it says. It says, "Loves your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her." So the way Christ loved the church is He loved the church unconditionally, all right? The church, with all its flaws, with all its mistakes, with all its people that come from different corners, they all have their own little battles, but Christ just loves the church unconditionally. And this is what God says to men: love your wives, even though you may find them subjective, even though you may not agree with them, even though you may find it hard to understand them. Just love them unconditionally, right? And I hear you say, guys, both men and women will ask, "Hidan, but why do I need to obey a man that... Well, what if my man doesn't know how to lead? What if he's addicted to drinks? What if he doesn't know how to lead?" And men will ask, "Why should I love a woman unconditionally? What if she's a witch? Why should I love her?" Well, these verses imply that for a beginning, you should be with a person who you know to be good, right? Like, we already know that you should not be loving unconditionally every second woman you meet, right? Because according to the Bible, there is no divorce. According to the Bible, you marry for a lifetime. The only two things that can break a marriage, according to the Bible, are cheating and death, all right? So the Bible implies that if you're going to be with a person, that's going to be the person you've chosen for all your life. And if you're going to choose someone for your whole life, well, of course, you're going to choose someone who knows how to lead, or someone who deserves to be loved unconditionally, right? So moving on, guys, to our second to last verse. It says, "Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives, when they see your respectful and pure conduct." Really interesting verse. So it says to women that even though some husbands, like previously mentioned, may not understand all topics or be good in all topics or lead in a good manner in all topics, you should still obey them, right? Because by your own conduct, now this is more talking about a spiritual aspect of it, right? But it is said that when a woman leads, and she leads by example, that this will probably make a change in men. Again, if we imply that this is a good man who wants to change for good, right? And I find this very interesting, guys, and you've heard many analogies of these, that the husband is the head of the family while the wife is the heart, or that the husband is the head, the wife is the neck. You know, because it's really interesting how again it doesn't imply that one is the slave and the other is the ruler. No, it's just two different roles. That's what it's all about. It's about roles. It's not about being more important. It's not about being necessarily a better person. It's just about roles that must be fulfilled, right? And women, even though they are not the quote unquote head, you know, the decision making operation doing part of the body, they are equally as important. You know, the heart, the neck, they all lead in different ways. So I think that women have equally as big of power to change, shape, or lead the relationship, just in a different manner. Do you agree with that, gentlemen? And look, I gotta tell you, I think that this is not up for debate, the fact that men should lead. If you ask feminists, they're gonna tell you that that's patriarchal, but I tell you what, guys, even the most red-haired, bitter feminist of them all, she wants to be led. She doesn't like things to be equal. She doesn't want, when a problem arises, for her to have a nice conversation with her boyfriend where both are held to the same standard. They don't want that. They want men to be the problem solvers. They want men to understand their feelings and make them feel secure and all that, alright? They want men to lead, even though they may not admit it. But now, guys, let's move on to our last verse from the Bible. It says, "Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered." So what Peter means here with weaker vessel, you know, is what we talked about, that women are more emotional. You know, they're just not as objective in most of the cases. They cannot be held accountable to the same point that men are. And I don't know about you guys, but personally, I've had this mistake with women that I've been with, that I was too critical, you know, I was too judgmental of their behavior. I tried to hold them to a standard that I hold myself to, and even I am not able to keep with that standard, all right? So what's left for women? And it took me a lot of years to realize that women are just not men, and you cannot really expect women to be men. You cannot expect to hold them to the same standard, all right? Because we fulfill different roles, and women are just more emotional. And there's nothing wrong with that, I think, if not taken to the extreme. So again, the verse says that you should live with your wives in an understanding way, you know, showing understanding towards the fact that they are different. And as the previous verse said, that you should love them with their mistakes and with their flaws and with their things, just like Christ loved the church, all right? But before we close, John, I'm going to play some gameplay because I want to get 3 things clear, all right? 3 things that are beliefs about the Bible that I find are interesting to have a discussion about regarding men and women. And the first one is God is a man, all right? Someone will say, God is a man. Isn't that convenient? You know, oh, God is a man. How patriarchal. God is not a man, all right? God doesn't have a gender. He doesn't need one. He's not a human. So God is not a man. Now, granted, he wants to be portrayed as a man, and he does state so, but this is not because he's a man. This is just, again, because God fulfills a role in regards to humans that is more, you know, understandable from a male perspective, you know, more attributed to men. But God is not a man. Again, he doesn't have a gender. Another thing is, God created Eve out of Adam. Again, this is something that some people will say, well, how patriarchal, you know, or Eve, what are you meaning to tell me? I'm less than men? I was made out of them, I'm less than them? No, this is a very, very interesting topic for me. And I've thought about it, right, that why did Adam feel alone in heaven? You know, why didn't God create Adam to feel all right on his own? Why didn't God could have made humans to be genderless, or for there to be just one gender, so just men, for example, without the need of women? Why didn't God do that? Why did God create 2 genders? Well, because he wanted to have this dynamic. God wanted for there to be two different sorts of people. All right. And another question that you can ask is, well, why didn't God create them both from the beginning? Did he forget about women? No, guys, he didn't forget. There's the thing. God didn't forget to make women. God didn't forget to tweak the settings of Adam. Adam says, oh, I'm feeling lonely. And God, oh, you oopsie daisy, I forgot to tweak the settings. I forgot to make him not feel lonely. No, it was all intended, and it's a beautiful metaphor. God wanted Adam to feel lonely. All right, in the glory of God, in the presence of angels, with all the animals and nature and all the things that Adam could have done, with immortality and everything that he had, Adam still felt like he's missing something. And that was part of God's plan. Right? God made Adam first so he could realize that he needs someone else. And then he created Eve. All right? And the way that he created Eve out of one of Adam's ribs is because Adam later says, and I paraphrase, you are flesh of my flesh, your bones from my bones, implying that they are one. Men and women are one. They complement each other. They are meant to be the same flesh. They're not meant to be two different particles that coexist in a symbiotic relationship. No, they are one. They become one flesh. So again, God didn't create Adam first to create some sort of power dynamic. No, it's a metaphor and it's symbolic. There is a lot of meaning and thought behind it. But lastly, guys, I want to cover some other belief, again, regarding men and women. Some people believe that, well, Adam sinned only because Eve sinned. That Eve sinned first, and if it were not for Eve, Adam would have never sinned. Now, it's interesting to think about this. And yes, Eve sinned first. This is something that even God mentions, right? And I believe, again, that this is why God intended for men to rule over women, because it was Eve who, went to eat the fruit. It wasn't Adam. Adam probably wouldn't have sinned in that aspect. But it's important to point out, guys, that Adam sinned just in the same way as Eve did. And it comes down to disobeying God. It comes down to putting yourself first before God. All right? This is the mistake that they both made. And it is the same mistake, and it weighs the same. Right? Just because Eve was first doesn't mean that she is more to blame, because Adam had his chance as well. Well, Adam didn't eat the fruit. Yeah, but he had his own test. He had his own way to prove his loyalty to God, and he didn't. And this is also a misconception that I find. A lot of people say that, believe that, God's sin was loving too much. He was just so much of a Romeo, where he said that, oh, I simply cannot live with the idea of losing Eve. This is why I'm going to follow her faith. Guys, that is not the case. Adam did not do this out of pure love, or right, like, oh, I really cannot live without Eve. I'm going to sacrifice myself for her. No, the reason why Adam sinned is because of selfishness. In the same way that Eve sinned because she wanted more. She wanted, more insight, more progression in her life. She wanted the fruit to make her better. In the same way, Adam was just too comfortable with his lifestyle, and this is why he didn't want to obey God. All right, Adam didn't do this like a sacrifice for love. Oh, I cannot live without her. No, guys. This was just because he felt comfortable. And you can see that because when Jesus comes around at a later point and asks Adam, what has happened? Why are you naked? And what was the first thing that Adam says? Adam says, it's the wife you gave me, pointing his finger. Oh, you did this. You gave me this wife that did this. So immediately putting the blame somewhere else outside of him, all right? It's not, guys, it's not because Adam loved Eve in such a way that he was willing to sacrifice and share her faith, did this out of love outside of himself. No, it was selfishness. And you can see that because then the first instance right after, he doesn't say, well, Jesus, I did this because I couldn't live without Eve. I'm going to sacrifice myself for her. No, he just said, well, it's her fault. you know, immediately turning on her. He supposedly did this whole thing because he couldn't stand to live without her, but in the first instance he actually blames her, you know, like, oh, punish her, she's the one to blame. So I believe that it's really the same sin that they both committed, which is disobeying God, because they put themselves first before God, you know. So what we can learn from this, gentlemen, is that men and women are different. They, you know, they sinned in a different way, but in the end they sinned for the same reason. And you see that God also punished men and women in a different way. And when it comes to women, I think that in the past they were different, yet I think that they always held the same flaws in life, the same difficulty women have always had. It's just that nowadays it's way more imbalanced than it was in the past, you know. But I think that it's interesting to point out that women, this is why I think they need men to lead, because men and women complement each other, and one of the benefits that women receive is that they get a man to lead, you know, to lead them to peace, to lead them to tranquility, to be the emotional back pillar of the relationship, right? I think this is something very important that women get out of a relationship with a man. But the problem is, guys, that a lot of women today, because of high body counts and dealing with bad boys and growing addicted to anxiety and all that, they just simply are too much of a liability to be saved, all right? A lot of these men that want to fix women and save women, even if they want to, they cannot do it, all right? So women kind of cut their own blessings this way. But guys, we've taken a look at philosophers' takes, we've taken a look at some religious takes, you know. So I want to know what your opinion is about all of this. And in the previous video we did some math, taking a look at some graphs and data. Now we've taken an approach with philosophy and religion. And look, next time we're gonna take a look at the geographical map of the West, and we're gonna try to explain why women suck at dating with geography. All right, we're gonna take a course through all the subjects, guys, and if you understand them all, I'm gonna give you a degree. You know, you've passed the University of Understanding why we have a hoflation. All right, we're gonna take a marketing perspective from it as well, guys. But now, enough about all of that. Thank you for watching. Leave me your thoughts down below, guys, and I'll be happy to see you next time. Have a good one.